We're seeing a rush toward gun control in a handful of states, places like Colorado, Washington, Oregon, New Mexico, and the like. And when you see this push toward gun control in these particular states, one might get the impression that the Second Amendment movement is on the run. But is this really true, or is this phenomenon we're seeing actually the result of some other, ironically, great news for the Second Amendment? Let's talk about what we're talking about and how this all breaks down when we come back. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Box Diner, proud American gun owner, constitutional attorney, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, and I'm proud to say the top voice of the Second Amendment, thanks to the 2025 Gundies Awards. Thank you for your support. I know a lot of you out there push for that, and I really do appreciate it. Okay, folks, so we're going to make an observation here that is unfortunate on the one hand, but on the other hand, there's some really good news associated with it. I know it's going to sound a little contradictory here, but I don't think it is. In the last several months, we've seen a big push in blue states where they're trying to enact crazy gun control laws of the sort we've never seen before in those states. Specifically, I'm talking about the insanity we've been seeing recently in, let's say, Washington State, where like Washington gun law, William Kirk has done a great job covering that out there. I feel bad for him and the rest of the Americans that live in Washington State, controlled by the city of Seattle. But with that said, that is where things are getting pushed. And my former law school classmate, Bob Ferguson, the governor out there, absurd, this craziness that's going on out there. But, when you have the city of Seattle voting for all this nonsense and overwhelming the Americans that live in the state, well, that's what you get, things like that. But you also see this kind of push for crazy gun control laws in places like Colorado and Oregon, and of course, in places like New Mexico. Now, at one level, it's terrible, 100% terrible, and I oppose all these gun control laws, to see this big push in certain states. But I want to give you kind of the strange good news that is causing this push for insane gun control laws in these states. You see, the dynamic that's occurring in America right now with the anti-gun movement, is as follows. The anti-gun movement, thanks to people like Michael Bloomberg and the Joyce Foundation and others, has really almost infinite resources to push for gun control law. And who knows exactly how many millions of dollars the American gun control movement has received in effect from places maybe we haven't noticed before, like USAID, that has been uncovered by Elon Musk and Doge and all that. But however you want to discuss the sources of wealth and income and donations to America's gun control movement, the reality is this. Despite all that money that's out there that's been going to gun control, the reality is the number of places that infinite amount of dollars can go to make any kind of difference has been dramatically shrinking. What do I mean by that? If you think about it, during the Biden years, all that anti-gun movement could be used, for example, to try to push federal legislation, to try to, support the Kamala Harris-Joe Biden Office of Gun Violence in the White House. In addition to that, they had a bunch of states they could try to push gun control laws through. And they could fund, through public health schools, for example, social science and other studies that would suggest or argue that gun violence, which is a non-existent thing, but it's a political propaganda term, so-called gun violence, is an epidemic, entitling it to be treated as a public health problem. Now, with that said, here is the great news that has given rise to the terrible news in a handful of these blue states. The great news is, of course, from the NYSERPA versus Bruen decision in 2022 by the United States Supreme Court. They've said unequivocally, and they reiterated this in Rahimi in 2024, that you cannot consider as a court the good and the bad of gun laws. You cannot consider the social science benefits, the pros and the cons of gun control. That goes all the way back to Heller. It was reaffirmed in Bruen and Rahimi. The reason why the elimination of tiers of scrutiny, which is really just interest balancing of guns good versus guns bad, all of that tiers of scrutiny, intermediate scrutiny, strict scrutiny, all that has gone away as a matter of Supreme Court decisions and Supreme Court jurisprudence. And this is very good because it means all of those tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars that the anti-gun movement has spent to create studies and research and papers and white papers and this kind of study and that kind of report, whatever, to argue that guns are bad in all sorts of various ways, can all be taken and thrown in the trash when it comes to court cases. Because the Supreme Court says that when you're analyzing a Second Amendment challenge to a modern-day gun control law, the good and the bad of guns does not come into play, which means that all that money that Michael Bloomberg and other organizations have spent to try to create sort of a social science, scientific argument that guns are bad, that private gun ownership is dangerous and so on, is irrelevant. It's irrelevant. Which means that any additional money spent in that area has some public policy benefits in terms of arguing to legislatures and stuff like that, perhaps. But as a matter of law, it really is irrelevant. Beyond that, right now, Donald Trump is the president and has closed the Office of Prevention of Gun Violence. That's closed. The House is controlled by Republicans. The United States Senate is controlled by Republicans. There's not going to be any new federal gun control laws moving forward. And I have every confidence that very soon a lot of those Joe Biden ATF regulations that were promulgated over the last 4 years are going to go away in various ways. And as you know, as we sit here today, we have almost 30 states that have permitless carry, which means you can carry a gun, handgun, on your body without a permit in 29 states. Soon to be 30, I suspect. That's the vast majority of states in this country. And the rest of the states are shall issue permitting regimes. Now, why is all that good news sort of bad news and bad news kind of good news? And it's this following. There is so much money out there in the anti-gun movement, it has to go somewhere. To give you an example, Michael Bloomberg has given Johns Hopkins over $1 billion. I think it's something like $2 billion over the last 10 years or so. Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland has renamed its public health school the Michael Bloomberg Public Health School because Michael Bloomberg has given so many billions of dollars to Johns Hopkins. And of course, we know that he's funded and helped, I think he actually helped found and build, Every Town for Gun Safety with, according to a report by the Chronicles of Philanthropy, it says that Michael Bloomberg is arguably the most dominant figure in the gun violence prevention movement. I think that's fair to say. And it goes on to say that the media titan has reportedly contributed, and this, by the way, is a story from 2022, so who knows what's happened in the last few years. He has reportedly contributed, according to this article by the Chronicles of Philanthropy, $270 million to causes and candidates in pursuit of tighter gun control laws. He also established Every Town for Gun Safety, the largest advocacy group in 2014, with a $50 million pledge. That's Michael Bloomberg. In addition to that, the Joyce Foundation, you'll see where I'm going with this, the Joyce Foundation has an entire website, or web page at least, on their foundation website, talking about gun violence prevention, including litigating to defend evidence-based gun policies and to challenge extreme gun rights policies and practices. The Joyce Foundation has an endowment of over $1 billion, at least as of a few years ago. Now, the reason why I'm giving you these numbers is because the money that flows in to the anti-gun movement, to the gun control movement, to the gun safety movement, whatever you want to call this movement, really the anti-Second Amendment movement, in my opinion, that money is being spent somewhere in this country. It has to be spent by the people that are working in this area. And just put yourself in the shoes of someone working in the gun control movement today. Are you going to spend a lot of time lobbying Washington, D.C.? No. You're not going to get anywhere. Who are you going to talk to in Washington? The deep state people are on the run, as Donald Trump and Doge and Elon Musk are working to shut them down with various members of the cabinet. You're not going anywhere with the House of Representatives controlled by Republicans. You're not going anywhere with President Trump, who's a Republican and pro-Second Amendment. You're not going to go anywhere with the U.S. Senate now, where even John Cornyn, who's done some stupid things on the Second Amendment, as you well know from this channel, even John Cornyn is sponsoring a bill for permitless carry nationwide, as I recall, among other things. I'm sure John Cornyn is all about pushing the Second Amendment because he's up for re-election in less than 2 years, and he knows he's vulnerable from the right on that issue in light of his support for the bipartisan gun control law enacted in 2022. The point being, where's the money going to go? Where are the anti-gun efforts going to go in this country? If you can't go to Washington, you can't go to the House, you can't go to the Senate, you can't go to the White House, you can't go to the ATF anymore. And you can't go to those 30 states for all intents and purposes that have permitless carry. So where's all the money going to go? We know it. All that anti-gun money, or almost all of it in my view, it's my guess, but I'm guessing I'm right. It's my speculation, but I'm pretty sure I'm pretty good at this. I think this is where it's going. All that anti-gun money is laser focused, as a general matter, on the 15 states that are the so-called Democrat trifecta. The 15 states where there is a government trifecta, where a Democrat is the governor, a Democrat-controlled House in those states' legislatures, and there's a Democratic-controlled Senate in the state legislatures. So you have a Democratic-run trifecta in 15 states because the Democrat is the governor, the Democrats run the House and the Senate of those states. And those 15 states are, tell me if this rings a bell, for where all the crazy gun stuff is occurring. California, Hawaii, Oregon, New York, Illinois, New Jersey, Maryland, Colorado, Washington State, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Maine, New Mexico, Massachusetts, and Delaware are the 15 states that the Democrats have the so-called trifecta, complete control of the state government in those 15 states. Hear what I just said? In those 15 states, in that bucket of 15 states where the Democrats control, I include Washington State, Colorado, New Mexico, Maryland, Rhode Island, Delaware, Hawaii, Illinois, and so on. These are the exact same states that are pushing crazy gun control laws. And I suspect a big reason why they're doing so is that all the anti-gun efforts, all the anti-gun money, all the anti-gun resources, all the anti-gun experts, all the anti-gun lobbyists, all the anti-gun organizations have looked at the map and they said, why are we going to spend $7 in Florida? Why are we going to spend $5 in Texas? Why are we going to spend money in these crazy states, from their perspective, these states that we're not going to really accomplish anything in? We are much better off going to the states that the Democrats run top to bottom and just doing more and more crazy law. Just keep adding on and adding on and adding on, because at some point this is my guess, we in the gun control movement at the end of the year have to go back to our donors, to the foundations that support our efforts, to the foundations and donors and that give us money that allow us to do this work, which is interesting work, indoors, in air conditioning, without having to pick up a shovel or be that productive, in my view, right? It's light lifting indoor work. So it's a good gig. And I think a lot of these people probably get paid relatively well. So at the end of every year, they have to go back and presumably apply and get grant money from these gun control groups, these foundations that support gun control, from the Michael Bloomberg philanthropies and so on. They have to show they've done something. They have to show some amount of success somewhere in America. And since they're not able to do it at the federal level, they're not able to do it with the ATF, they're not able to do it as a general matter in the 30 states that have moved to the point where you have permitless carry and then some, where are they going to devote their money? It just makes sense. They have to go to those 15 states and double down and triple down and quadruple down on gun control law, just going back to the same well, because there's nowhere else for all that money and all that resources and all that focus to go. No one else cares what, some public health professor says about the danger to guns in most American states. But in the same 15 states run by the Democrats, they'll embrace that stuff and drink it up. So again, the reason why I'm shooting this video is for you to really understand the dynamic going on here. The fact is that the Second Amendment movement in the courts, especially at the Supreme Court, although it's not been perfect, we know that, but it's overall good, not perfect, not where we want it to be, but overall the trend is good. The trend at the federal level and so on, the trend for the Second Amendment in America has all been positive. It is forcing the anti-gun movement to retreat to those states where there is complete control by the Democratic Party. And that is why I think we're seeing these proliferation and explosion of insane, crazy gun control laws in a handful of states, because all the resources in the anti-gun movement have nowhere else to go but to those particular places. And they have to justify their existence, is my guess. And the only way to do that, to show any level of progress when it comes to advancing the gun control movement, is to go to these handful of states that the Democrats are in total control over and push for gun control. And that is what's happening. So again, the fact we're seeing bad headlines out of some states is terrible. On the other hand, to some degree, we are victims in those particular states of our overall success of the Second Amendment movement nationwide. That doesn't make life better for the people that are suffering at the hands of the gun controllers in those states, but big picture nationwide, it does show that the trend overall is our friend. Doesn't mean we love it, doesn't mean it can't be improved upon, doesn't mean it's perfect, but overall the trend is our friend, and I hope we can continue this trend for many years to come. So anyway, there you have it. Hope you appreciated this video on this interesting dynamic that's going on across the country. Make sure you follow me on X at 4Boxes Diner. Don't forget to subscribe both to YouTube and Rumble, and I look forward to talking to you again very soon here at the 4Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.